Good evening. This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation and Adjudication will now come to order. Notice of the public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on Thursday, February the 2nd, with a second notice provided on Thursday, February the 9th. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the legislature's website. There is only one bill on tonight's agenda, and that's Bill 4-34, introduced by the Vice Chairman of this committee, Senator Frank Aguon. And I'd like to introduce all of my colleagues. On my far left, Senator Frank Aguon, Senator Will Castro, Senator Estevez, Senator Bisco Lee, Senator Nelson, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Morrison, Senator Borja, Senator Terlahi, Senator San Agustin, Senator Espaldon, and Senator Torres. Inasmuch as he is the author of the bill, I will allow the Vice Chair to give an opening statement on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, and good evening, everyone. I just would like to thank you for having this particular public hearing, and it's on the proposed bill number 4, which is relative to reducing the compensation of a Maga'Låhen Guåhan, a Segundu na Maga'Låhen Guåhan, and senators of Liheslaturan Guåhan. And I want to say this, Mr. Speaker, that in this particular case, in considering the legislation that was going to be introduced, one of the items that I certainly recognized was the cabinet members were not included in this proposal. And because the cabinet members run the day-to-day operations of the respective government and Guam agencies, this legislation recognizes their effort. And in many instances, cabinet members come before this legislative body and we look for credentialed individuals. We look for individuals who have certain qualifications so that they can step into that particular position and carry out the responsibilities on behalf of the people of Guam. And that's why the cabinet members were not part of this. And there's a subsequent legislation that will be heard on the 20th of February, which is Bill number 5, which separates and bifurcates the compensation of the governor and the lieutenant governor from the cabinet members and allows for the governor to have the flexibility to identify the salary range that he would like to pay his cabinet members. So, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to mention that and highlight that because certainly as we consider this issue before the community, we know that it has not only been one of the more polarizing issues over the course of the past 2 years, but it really speaks volumes. It's time that we as public servants respond to the concerns and the issues of our people. I certainly hope that this is the first item placed on the legislative agenda when we resume session and that we address this. Let's get this out of the way and send it up to the governor so that in fact we can address other issues and concerns that are affecting our island and our community. So thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, for having the public hearing on this measure.
Thank you very much, Senator Aguon. We have a huge list, so let's get started. Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero and Mr. Andy Bynum. Please.
As I look around the room here and see so many people here, I am hoping that they are all here to testify in support of Bill 4. The reason I am hoping that they are here to testify supporting passage of Bill 4 is because Bill 4 very clearly separates the people in this issue into two distinct categories: the elected and the executive. Now, in order to be a senator or a governor, all you have to do is to be able to fog a mirror, not have a criminal record, and be a resident of Guam and get 250 signatures on a page. To hold some of the positions these people hold, You have to spend years of education, get training, certifications, and time in the field. And that's why I am in favor of Bill 4 and have been since 2015 when we requested that the 33rd Legislature break Bill 204 into 4 separate categories, because you can't treat everybody the same because they aren't the same. The governor and senators, department heads and mayors at that time were all different. They had different responsibilities, different methods of being selected to represent the people. You can't treat them all the same then. You can't treat them the same now. That's why we prefer Bill 4. Because with Bill 4, if everybody here is supporting passage of Bill 4, that is a good thing. If they're in opposition of Bill 4, then they demean their own professions. They say that it is important that the governor and you senators be the highest paid executives in the United States. It doesn't matter that you don't have the qualifications we have. It doesn't matter you haven't spent the years in the field that we have executing these critical functions. So John F. Kennedy said it many years ago, ask not what you can do for your country, but ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. What we see with this resistance to passing the pay raise rollback, we have people that have a sense of duty. That's the people back here. They're the ones that took the time to get the education, to get the training, get the certification, and spend the time in the field to qualify for the positions they hold. Then we have people that have a sense of entitlement. These are people that say, I deserve to be the highest paid government employee on the island. And that just doesn't fit well with the public at this time. So when we look back at what has happened over the past 2 years, what I would like to do is remember that this has been a paralyzing issue, and the public has spoken very clearly on how they feel about this. When we had a 30% increase in registrations between the primary and the general, and when we had the highest turnout in Guam history and even had the highest turnout in the nation, it spoke volumes about how the people feel about this issue. Now, Governor Calvo and many elected officials may proclaim that they are worth the price. I don't understand how public servants can sit there and tell the hard-working people on this island, you have to pay me what I think I'm worth. And based on the values that that statement displays, what do we tell an 18-year-old who joins the Army? How much should we pay him when he knows that there's a very strong chance that he will go into combat and could possibly be killed? How much should we be paying a person who has taken the time to go through school, get a college degree, and buy school supplies out of her own money instead of taking a career on Wall Street? How much should we be paying the guy that's standing waist deep in water at 2:30 in the morning trying to fix a water main break so that the people, when they get up in the morning, they'll have water? How much should we be paying him? How much should we be paying a social worker who stands between an abused mother and her husband who's threatening to kill her if she doesn't come back to him? How much should we be paying them? These are people that have a sense of duty. They don't do this because it's popular. They do this because they feel a need to serve. And these are just a few of the many examples of people I know within our community who feel a sense of duty and have chosen a career in public service. And we see many of them in this room today. And we, as a community, are fortunate that we have so many people who are willing to step up and serve the public. But when it comes to a sense of duty through public service, something is clearly out of line when our public officials vigorously defend their belief that they should be the highest paid on the island. I support Bill 4 because it focuses on rolling back the pay raises for elected officials without attacking the salaries of the public service executives. It's an important distinction. The requirements for government executives are very strict, many years of training. There are no requirements to be an elected official. So if anybody wants to adjust the pay raises of the government executives, it should be done on a case-by-case basis, looking at the duties of the agency, looking at the responsibilities that that agency has and the requirements of the executive leading that agency, because there are differences within the agencies. So again, you can't treat everybody the same. I'm not slamming any agency, but I offer the thought that the requirements to be the Director of Parks and Recreation are probably different than the requirements to be Director of Public Health or the Director of the Police Department. So that's why when we look at rolling back raises at the executive level, I think it needs to be done one department at a time, as opposed to this blanket approach that's being proposed under Bill 11. That's the other concern we had. The other concern I had, and many other people had, that the circus was going to continue, because now we have multiple bills being heard by multiple committees. These bills are going to be strung out over weeks or months, and then in the meantime, nothing is going to move forward. We're going to end up in a situation where I strongly fear that we're going to end up in a stalemate by the end of the 34th, just like we did at the end of the 33rd. So when I was approaching senators lobbying for this bill, I heard some amazing things. First, I learned that there are a few senators who believe that the governor deserves to be paid $130,000. And when I compared the governor of Guam's compensation with the governor of Colorado, because the governor of Colorado makes $90,000, and under Bill 4, the governor's compensation goes back to $90,000. And when I compared the responsibilities of the governor of Colorado with the governor of Guam, I was told point blank that the governor of Guam works so much harder because there is no county government or municipal governments in Guam, and governor of Guam runs the government all by himself. Now, the reason there's no counties here on Guam is we're 328 square miles. Colorado's 102,000 square miles. There are 64 county governments. Here in Guam, we do not have a single city that has a population of more than 100,000. Colorado has 12 cities that have a population of more than 100,000. The governor of Guam, by his own admission, has direct supervision of 4,000 employees and indirect supervision of 4,000 more. The governor of Colorado has direct supervision of 92,000 employees. And when you count the municipal and county governments, the state of Colorado has 327,000 government employees. And then we look at the budget. The budget that the governor and you will be handling will be somewhere under $900 million. The governor of Colorado and the senators there are going to be dealing with a budget in excess of $31 billion. They're also part-time. So another senator told me that it was humiliating for the governor to have employees that make more than he did. And to that senator, I said, if the governor wants to make that amount of money, why doesn't he go get back and get a PhD and teach college for 10 years and get tenure? Or why doesn't he go get his EMT license and then spend 10 years in the field if he wants to make that kind of money? I offer the example of the governor of Alabama, who, after he was elected, announced to the public, I have been a successful businessman most of my life. My needs are taken care of. I will take no salary. I will have no government residence. I will stay in my own home. He saves the government, he saves the taxpayers of Alabama $500,000 a year. So when the governor of Guam has the smallest area to govern. He has the smallest population to serve. He has the smallest workforce to manage. He has the smallest budget to administer of all the governors in the United States. And the governor of Guam is one of the highest paid governors in the United States. He earns the same salary as the governors of the many times more larger states of Iowa, Louisiana, and Florida. The governor of Guam is paid more than 20 other state governors and the governor of Puerto Rico. We know that Guam senators at $85,000 per annum are the third highest paid senators in the United States. you were only beat out by Pennsylvania by $338. If it wasn't for that, you'd be the second highest paid. And as the highest paid senators and the third highest, you represent the fewest people each. You have the lightest workload based on budget alone, so there's a sense of entitlement that some of you still cling to, and that attitude needs to change. We have a government that struggles daily to meet operational cost, one that is financially unstable and getting deeper into debt every year. We have a stagnant economy that creates more minimum wage jobs than it does middle-class jobs, and we are losing our children as they leave the island after graduation to find employment opportunities that pay them a living wage. These are the signs of a community in trouble. Another sign of a community in trouble is when elected officials hold the mistaken belief they are more important than the doctors and nurses who heal us, more important than the police and the military who protect us, more important than the teachers who help us build the future generations of Guam, and more important than the workers who maintain Guam's roads, water, and power systems. Puerto Rico is proof of what happens when elected officials lose their sense of duty and develop a sense of entitlement. Public service jobs are not glamorous, but they're vital jobs. Elected officials, on the other hand, have glamorous jobs, but not vital jobs. An island without elected officials will run better than an island without public servants. And since it seems there are still some elected officials who will not listen to the people and learn the full lessons of the election of 2016, I give you a recap of what you should have learned. In the eyes of the voters, the governor, lieutenant governor, and senators are paid too much for the work you do. But more important than that, the manner by which you gave yourselves massive pay raises, and not you, just the 33rd, gave yourselves massive pay raises and made it retroactive, broke the trust with the people. We are going to evaluate your campaign promises based on your actions on Bill 4. The voters are tired of the games Adelup and the 33rd played around the pay raise issue, and we're not going to stand for the same things to happen again. If you can't pass Bill 4 by veto-proof majority, the voters of Guam will do it for you. We have plenty of time to drive a voter initiative all the way through the 2018 general. So in conclusion, I'm urging you to listen to what the people told you in 2016 and work to pass Bill 4 by a vote of 15-0 to help you earn back the trust of the people. Now, for your education, I've included a list of governor compensation, which shows the governors, their salaries, the population, gross domestic product, state budget, and the cost per citizen. So if you look at Florida, their governor cost every citizen 1 penny a year. Governor Calvo cost the citizens of Guam $8 a year. When you look at this list, every state, with the exception of Guam, is in the cents. Let's see. And the highest is Wyoming at 18 cents. So Guam, the cost for a governor per citizen is considerably higher for Guam. And the same thing for the senators. When we look at California, a senator there costs citizens 31 cents, Pennsylvania $1.69, Guam $8, New York 60 cents, Puerto Rico $1.54, Illinois 93 cents, Ohio 69 cents, Massachusetts 36 cents, Hawaii number 2 $3.11, Wisconsin 30 cents, and Alaska at $1.42. There are only 10 states that pay state legislators more than $50,000 a year, and that was the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leon-Grow. Mr. Bynum.
Good evening, Senators, and congratulations to all the new Senators here tonight. My name is Andre Bainum, and I'm a citizen of Guam and chairman of Guamanians for Fair Government. We are not Republican or Democrat. We are not against anyone, nor are we running for office. Our goal is to right the wrong committed by the leaders of this island back in 2014. Here we are 2 years and 7 senators later discussing the 40% raises and retros you decided to give yourself with the justification that you deserve it. And I am here tonight to say once again, no, you don't. Why? Because of the smash and grab tactics that were employed just 2 weeks after the 2014 general election by the public servants of this island. With no public hearing and in record time, some of you who just weeks earlier promised to take care of the people decided to take care of yourselves first. You smashed and grabbed a $20,000 raise and returned to take thousands of additional dollars in retroactive money, making you one of the highest paid legislatures in the nation. Several attempts were made to right this wrong and restore virtue back into the conscience of anyone willing to serve the public. Unfortunately, your attempts failed, but the people of Guam did not fail this past election. They removed from office many of those senators who ignored the voice of the people and placed many of you on notice by dropping your standing in the election, because it's not about the money, but the willingness of the public servant to do right by the people for the right of the people. Now 2 years have passed, and you're still enjoying your ill-gotten gains of 2014. And what have the people received in return from some of the highest paid public servants in the nation? A dream and an effort at revitalization. By the way, congratulations on your revitalized legislative hall, and congratulations on your revitalized museum. But you know what else needs some revitalization? Our dilapidated schools need revitalization. Our village roads need revitalization. And our public hospital needs revitalization. You need to revitalize your efforts to help the 46,000 people on Guam who fall and live below the poverty line. You need to revitalize your efforts to lower the cost of food and health care for the people of Guam. That's the revitalization Guam needs. Your legacy as public servants should not be in the structures you build here in Agana, but with the people you help in the villages. Guamanians for Fair Government fully supports Bill 4-34 in its entirety. It's never been about the money for our group. As a matter of fact, you should be compensated for the work that you do, but not in the deceitful way that it was acquired back in 2014. Return the people's money and ask the people for a raise and tell them the amount, because whether you take $1 or $100, it's not your money, no matter how much you feel you deserve it. Please remember that despite the alternative facts that may be represented to you here tonight, there was no public hearing on your raises. The secretive nature followed by the amount and its retroactive nature led to only one conclusion: deceit. The people saw it and showed their disgust at the voting booths this past November. And that's whose voice matters. Now it's up to this legislative body to correct the mistake made by your predecessors. Finally, Senator William Castro, Senator Luis Muña, Senator Fernando Esteves, Senator Joe San Agustin, we look to you to join the other senators and do right by the people. Your loyalties are to the people of Guam and not political affiliations or political party. Stand on the side of the people who clearly saw the injustice of those deceitful raises. Let's put this in the past and let's restore trust, integrity, and honesty to this legislature. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much. Senator Aguon, do you have any questions of these two? Any member have any questions?
I would just like to ask Mr. Leon Guerrero, is that something you compiled or that's something that you pulled off of another source, the list? And can we get a copy of it, please? Yeah.
I got the compensation off Ballotpedia. So if you go to ballotpedia.org, it's a sub of National Coalition of State Legislatures.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bainum, Mr. Leon Guerrero, thank you for testifying. I guess, I'm conflicted in my own mind about how to approach this whole, restructuring of where we are now to where we should probably be. Mr. Leon Guerrero, you kind of said that there are two classifications when it comes down to elected leaders and the executive branch. and I guess the question probably is pertinent also to you, Mr. Bainum. If we're talking about elected leaders, and of course in this bill we're talking about the governor, lieutenant governor, and the senators, what are your thoughts on also including within the restructuring, bringing it back, and then perhaps taking a look at what the pay should be, including the mayors?
Well, in my opinion, you treat everybody exactly the same when they're exactly the same. So when we're looking at the categories here, we requested Bill 204 be broken into 4 different categories because everybody in those categories were similar. We like Bill 4 in the fact that it separates the elected officials from the administrative officials. So that's a better distinction than lumping everybody together, because how are we going to justify rolling back some people without rolling back other people? So that's why I was hoping that we wouldn't have the circus that we had last time with all those competing bills. Because what happened, we had senators who would support one bill but wouldn't support the other, support this bill, wouldn't support that, and everybody got to say, we voted to roll back the pay raise, but it was them. And so despite 10 different opportunities to roll back the pay raises, and I don't even know how many votes on the 10 opportunities, the effort failed. So if you want to regain the moral high ground to begin to address the compensation at all different levels of 208, then we need to start somewhere. And the best place to start would be with the elected officials. Then we could recognize that with the administrative officials, there are a lot of differences there. Rather than a...
I understand what you're saying, but in that same vein, right, mayors are elected officials as well.
Yes, mayors are elected officials as well.
And so I'm just trying to understand, how do we, I guess, take it more from a holistic point? If we're going to adjust the salaries and the compensation to elected officials, should they not be included in this bill?
I'd like to ask you, Senator, why would you include them?
Because
why would you want to include them?
Because, first of all, again, the distinction was made between the elected officials and non-elected officials. And so in that same vein, first of all, they are elected officials. Second of all, Mr. Bain, if I just may continue, right, if we don't include them, then we have, and we do roll back these salaries for the Senate, for the governor, lieutenant governor, and the senators, right, then all of a sudden there is a restructuring of perhaps the form of government. Just an example, right, prior to all the raises, right, we had the governor at $90,000. We had the lieutenant governor at $85,000. Senators were at $60,840. Mayors were at $46,000, and we had vice mayors at $42,000. If we do repeal just the governor, lieutenant governor, and the senators, then we will have a whole different paradigm. We will now have a governor that, okay, is still $90,000. You have a lieutenant governor that's $85,000. Then you have the mayors who are at $75,000, and then you have the vice mayors at $68,000, and then you have the senators at $60,000. And that's almost a restructuring of perhaps the way that we view the importance of elected officials. And that's kind of like where I'm kind of going on this, Mr. Bainum.
So you don't feel that you should, as a senator, that mayors who are at the front lines of our villages and everything they do should be getting paid more than you? Is that why you're asking for this parity? Or
no, because again,
I'm trying to understand your logic behind the question. They were a part of, I can only speak for my organization and myself when I say that they were a part of the initial public hearing that took place in January of 2000. You guys decided to remove yourselves of 2014.
Okay.
You decided to remove yourselves from the conversation, right? And then come back to it later. So there was a public hearing on the pay raises for GovGuam employees and the mayors, but you guys, for some, I don't know what it was, whether it was politics, whether you felt that it wasn't something that would fly with the public, you decided to remove yourself from that public hearing and then continue it right after the election, and and then the rest is history, and that's why we're sitting here. So if you want to decide how you want to work that out, I think that's you guys. I mean,
Right, but I
you
mean-
created the problem, and then you're asking us for a solution.
I'm not asking for a solution. I'm wondering what the picture is when we start talking about elected officials versus non-elected officials. And so in my mind, and just to be clear, I was not a member of the legislature at the time that bill was passed. I
Right.
came in on the 33rd
Right.
after the fact.
Right.
All right. But in trying to address this certain situation, right, then there becomes, I guess, an inequity. Because first of all, it's not that, and I'm not trying to demean the responsibilities and downplay what the vice mayors and the mayors go through, right? Because we do have separate job descriptions. I mean, I know for my part what I do and the mental tasks that it takes to address a lot of different areas that was mentioned by both you and Mr. Leon Guerrero in terms of what we need to do to help the island as a whole. Whereas the mayors are dedicated to just their precincts or their villages, right? And their concerns are different from our concerns. Theirs are more operational in nature and administrative just for their constituency in that village. And you do have some mayors who have very small constituencies in their village, and yet they will be paid more than some of the responsibilities that we have. Coming forward, I know, and I just speak for myself, when I was a former senator prior to my return, right, I did take on many tasks that probably go way over and above what a mayor could or should do. And to the point when the military buildup was first announced, and we went to Washington, D.C. to try to understand what kind of federal assistance and aid we would get outside the fence, we held many high-level negotiations with the various departments there. When we got no response, when I got no response, or at least a delegation, I was then able to secure a meeting with the foreign minister of Japan to try to understand what the Japanese side could do. And I'm just saying that the roles that we play are different, right, between the mayors and the senators. Because when we start taking a look at the long-term viability and long-term health of our island, it goes way beyond just the scope of a village per se. It goes really into the long-term future of what we really believe should be a policy or what we can drive in terms of policy or even benefits to the island. And so that's why I have to include the question of, again, not to undermine anybody's responsibility, whether it's the vice mayor or mayors or whatnot, right? Because if the argument is still going to be that that money should be used, any pay raise increase should be used to go address some of these situations, then why shouldn't that also be included?
Well, what you have to do is you have to reclaim the moral high ground first before you can start going into these future very tumultuous budget hearings, because you're going to be forced through reality to make hard decisions about government of Guam, and the mayors are part of that equation at some point in time.
Right.
Because
But
if we drag the mayors into this equation right now, the mayors didn't have anything to do with you guys getting the pay raise and the retroactive. They were
understood.
separate.
But again, I don't think that we're making that clear distinction of how that works.
Well, if I could, right, I support Senator Aguon's bill.
And I understand.
Okay, I think it has the best chance of passing. What the focus needs to be is to reverse this problem, reverse this issue that the people clearly this past election said was not something that they wanted. So maybe we can do that first, and then maybe Mr. Leon Guerrero's ideas of kind of parsing it out and then working on it. But the main thing we need to do is reverse this bill, get rid of this thing, so we can, like all of you have said up there, move on to more important things.
So
My school again has been, protested to, and they didn't even put the RFP out, and it was protested the same day. We don't have Xerox allotment in our school. No more paper, sir. We got a lot of problems on this island, but we need to put this behind so we can put our trust in you guys again. That's what this has been all about. It's not about the money. You guys are doing a great job. All of you people back here deserve what you get paid. All right? But the manner in which it was done, the deceitfulness, that kind of stuff needs to stop, so we can say, hey, I can go to my senator and I can trust them that they're going to take care of this situation for me. That's what's happening out there.
and I
Potholes are popping up all over the place. So, Senator, with that question, I really think is not, something that, my advocacy or his advocacy should be actually addressing and dealing with. The creation of that problem with the mayors and the parity and who's getting paid more and who does what based on what level, that's something that needs to be dealt with from this legislative body to fix what happened before. You know what I'm trying to say?
And I appreciate that. And I understand the frustration, and it's been a frustration that's been there since, again, this whole issue came up. Right, and I really believe, and I've said it publicly, why there was definitely perhaps an indignation suffered by the people, much like yourselves and those who are like, what happened here, right? Mm-hmm. But I do want to say a couple things to that. First of all, I think that really the one of the big reasons that really brought attention to this whole issue was, first of all, the retro. That was a big issue, right? Because in my mind. And again, please just remember, I was not a member of the legislature at that time. But in my mind, I think, at least as I was going through the campaign for the 33rd, that was really, I think, the sticking point for a lot of people. It was not so much the issue of the raise. It was like, really, it went retro? Because normally, whenever law is passed, it goes prospective. It goes forward. It doesn't go backward. And for some reason, for whatever reason, it went retro. And I understand that. The other issue I think that suffers, again, some insult to the public is perhaps the amount of the raise. But it goes back to the issue I was asking about the mayors. Because when you take a look at what and again, I don't like saying this because I don't want the mayors to feel that I'm trying to undermine them, but they have to be part of this discussion. Because when you take a look at the percentage of increase that the mayors got, and yes, it may have been voted on by the legislature, but that is the conduit to do it. But when you take a look at the dollar amount, or at least the percentage amount, they got a raise of 63%, right? Whereas, and then the vice mayors got a raise of 61%.
Well, that was approved by the 33rd, sir.
Right, and like I said, because that's the only way
it was created by the legislative body.
Well,
and you're asking us how to fix that?
No,
I don't
I'm not
think,
asking
sir.
you how to fix it. I'm asking you whether the mayors should be included in this whole readjustment of pay to roll back everybody's elected a pay raise, and then to bring it back up to whatever might be a more equitable.
Yes, Senator, we have never included the mayors in any of our arguments. We're here tonight to discuss Senator Frank Aguon's bill, and that is to reduce the salary of the elected senators,
right,
and the governor and lieutenant governor.
Well, and the reason why I bring it up, because if it should become part of the conversation, then we could include it as when the bill comes to the floor.
Well, this comes under the category of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. This is the first bite. This is the bite that really has upset the public the most. So if we're going to solve this problem, let's attack the point of most pain, which was the manner in which the raises were carried out, and start there. So when we look at the fact that the 33rd was called into an emergency session in violation of all the rules of the legislature and passed it.
If I could just stop you there, Mr. Guerrero, because it was not an emergency session; it was a special session.
All right, special session.
Right. No, and there is a distinction.
It was a very special session.
There is a distinction because you're right. In local law, it does require that any bill that is heard by the legislature needs to have a public hearing. However, if you take a look at federal law and more specifically the Organic Act, the Organic Act actually gives the governor the power to call a special session, right, in what he believes to be in the public interest.
Well, how was that in the public interest?
Well, and again, that's for them to explain, not for us to explain. And I'm just saying, I'm just trying to make that distinction right now.
Well,
right?
What we're saying is we're here for Bill 4.
Understood.
Bill 4 is limited to...
But you brought up the point about the absence of a public hearing. And the question is, have there been instances, at least in my mind, as I discuss it with my staff and others in policy, right, have there been other instances where the governor, and maybe not this our governor right now, but in past governors, who have set down a bill that was heard without a public hearing? And,
wouldn't know.
Well,
there was no public hearing.
Well, no, but that's not the point. The point is, was a bill sent down from the governor and the legislature addressed it without a public hearing because it was in the interest of the public at the time. And we're researching that. I don't have the answer to that. But again, if you could comparing the local statute versus the federal statute, first of all, the federal statute, which is the Organic Act, our Constitution per se, that's what it provides for, right? And so, you know, I understand the argument, right? There was no public hearing. It would have been nice for everybody to come down and say yes, no, maybe so, right? But I guess when you look at the law, right, we have to ask that question, right? Was there or was there not a public hearing? And first of all, and maybe even preceding that, is that a requirement by law? Under local law, it is. Under federal statute or the Organic Act, it isn't. Right, and so I just want to make sure I say that for the record. And I'm not trying to undermine your arguments, but I just want to make sure that I understand, or that we all understand, right, that argument is a two-edged sword, right, because there is a federal reply. I mean, there's federal requirements that state one thing, and then there's local law that states another. And in that situation, a federal law would definitely trump. I'm just saying that
we're dealing with humans. We're dealing with the people of the island and the voters, and that's who put you all in office, and almost every single one of you campaigned that you were going to roll back the raises. This is the first opportunity to roll back the raises, to address the concerns that the voters made very clear to you for your entire campaign season. This is the bill that will do it in the cleanest way. When I say the cleanest way, these guys here weren't in that room in November. They didn't pass that pay raise and retroactive.
Nobody was in the room because only the legislature can pass that.
That's the whole point.
I mean, so that's
nobody. That's why we wanted to. We like Bill 4 because it sticks to the people that were involved in the passing of the pay raise. Mayors had nothing to do with it. Department heads had nothing to do with it. If this this is why I say it's important for you guys to reclaim the moral high ground, because at some point in time you're going to be looking at a diminishing income stream, and you're going to have to be making hard choices about where to cut.
And I appreciate that.
And if you start here in this house first, you'll have more credibility when you go to the mayors and say, you know, you only have 300 residents and they've got 44,000. You know, it's not fair that you get the same compensation and the same budget. You see, that's the conversation you're going to have later as you look at the diminishing resources and maximum utilization for the benefit of the citizens. But let's stick with
I don't
one
anticipate
bite
that
at a time.
conversation with the mayors, because really I'm looking at a broader picture, right? When we start talking about what you're talking about in terms of that money going towards, you know, of the salary increases of elected officials going towards certain bills that we should pay, then again, that's why I started off with that whole line, is because it's in the same category.
Yeah,
right,
well,
of monies.
Yes,
right?
it is.
And it's not going to be about one mayor making more than the other mayor. It's about the mayors, again, have had an increase, the largest increase of all the elected officials, and whether or not that should be included in this whole rollback.
I don't want to interrupt at this point, but really seriously, let's stick to Bill 4, which is just the governor and the senators.
But it's relevant, Mr. Speaker, because of the fact of the rules that we have now and the new rules, right? If it's not brought up at public hearing, then we cannot address it in session, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring it up.
Okay, thank you. And there are two other bills that are going to be heard at a later date, and you can address it at that time. Okay, and I thank the two for sticking to just Bill 4.
May I just ask one last question, Mr. Speaker? And again, same line for Mr. Bainham, and he's been very consistent all this time. And he's shown a great concern for the process that this whole pay raise went through. And you've said it several times, and I believe you said it tonight, that it wasn't so much about the raise itself, it was how it was given. And so I would take, and I'm just clarifying for my own mind, that if we roll this back and there is another bill that comes in to introduce it the proper way and to have it publicly heard, that the process itself you would not object to.
proper.
Right.
Now, I understand your line of thinking as far as there was a public hearing and whether it was the rules are different. Those things can be suspended at any time, changed, rules change all the time. You guys can decide whether it's an emergency or not. And all. So you're in charge of the rules. The main thing here, and just simple, the people's money is under your safeguard. And you went ahead right after the election when you thought no one was paying attention, and you guys called a special session, and you took that money and you gave it to yourselves. Not all of you up here, because some of you weren't there, but you took it and you gave it to yourself. That's a problem. So I don't mind. Like I said in my earlier testimony, you should be getting paid for your services that you do to the people of Guam. But that needs to be done, the compensation and all of the things that preceded what happened in 2014, that needs to change. That type of mentality, all of that stuff needs to change. And yeah, I don't mind us revisiting the pay raises for senators again, or at least the public does, and do it out in the open so we know what's happening, we know where the money's going, and we can rest assured again, like I said, that the integrity and trust that we place in you guys can be renewed and is there.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For day, gentlemen. I think we've spoke on many different occasions, and just to clarify, I think while the intention is the same, you guys do come from two different positions. I guess fundamentally, I think Mr. Bainum, with respect, it's to the principle and how it was done, and we've talked, and I agree. I think the way it was done, I don't approve of it, and I'm just coming off as a regular citizen as well, moving into this arena, that being one of the driving forces. And I think, Mr. Leon Guerrero, you did make comment that, and you put forth some evidence showing that you do not agree with the quantity, correct?
Well, when we look at the state of the economy of the island, and we look at the financial situation we are in, we have to realize that you guys are the policy makers of the island. The administration executes your policies that you create. Now, if you guys create excellent policies and our economy takes off and our children start coming home and we start creating more middle-class jobs and less minimum wage jobs, then I won't have as much an issue on the compensation level as I do now. Now, the reason why I say that is because every man, woman, and child on Guam is contributing $8 apiece to your compensation. What are you guys doing to help them? I mean, the Senator Cruz, I watched and supported his minimum wage bill for 2 years, and in 2 years we've gotten a 95-cent raise. And that was only after 3 or 4 round tables, half a dozen public hearings, and then it got cut back, and then conditions got thrown on it. You guys got a $25,000 raise in about 13 and a half hours. And it was retroactive. And there was no economic study,
if I may,
required.
Back to the topic at hand. I guess the question I was going to ask, there was a study done and the compensation was determined. And I think with respect to the information you put out, and that is a resource I use as well, we're comparing ourselves to other states. And,
yes,
I'm a big advocate for the island of Guam and the people of Guam and how unique we are and our unique problems, which is a passion for me, and that's why I'm here. And the reason I bring this is how many states, let's say to include territories, have a unicameral legislature? Ken?
Well, that question isn't applicable to this situation. I don't know, and I'll tell you why.
It's three.
Okay.
Nebraska, which is the only one that has a nonpartisan legislature made up of 49 members. Their salaries are on the lower end. But the other one is the U.S. Virgin Islands and Guam. Mm-hmm. Do you know what the salary is in the U.S. Virgin Islands with a somewhat comparable GDP and comparable bond rating in terms of financial situation. For the unicameral House of 15 senators in the U.S. Virgin Islands, also a territory, is $85,000 a year, and the governor's salary is $130,000, with the lieutenant governor also matching as well. So I think there was definitely some scientific input in putting out the numbers, and my only concern is if we start getting to the point where we arbitrarily decide what these numbers are, and with respect to your position on where we are in terms of our financial situation, you did support the minimum wage study, and I did as well, and it actually shows our GDP is increasing. So, you know me, I do my homework, and I just wanted to, in light of the public, put out information, not necessarily contrary to what you put out, but just so that the public as a whole has all the information that's out there in terms of the decision and opinion.
If I could, Mr. Estevez,
Yes.
Senator Estevez, if you want to, revisit this and raise your salaries up again, so then bring that before the people and tell them, with all the issues that we're having on this island, tell them that we want to be like, the third highest paid, and we want to be like the Virgin Islands, and because other places bring that argument before the people. And I think that would be fair. If you don't hear an uproar from the people, then pay yourself that. But I really think that with all the issues that we're facing right now, that the argument about whether, the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico or anywhere else, who's getting paid what, I don't think that would matter to people. The students that I take care of, and where they can't even afford to go on a field trip because their parents can't give them $10 to go to pay for the bus.
I
So
understand.
go ahead and bring that up, and we'll see how that flies with the general public when their roads are awful and their hospital has to borrow money, and we have to wait months and months and months to get paid our tax returns. Bring that argument up and say, hey, that's what they get paid in the Virgin Islands. And that's basically what I meant also, Senator Espaldon, is, bring up that argument. You can, all of you, and see.
Thank you. And I think one other, and you guys are testifying in support of the bill in its entirety?
Yes.
All right. And is it the responsible of government officials from the top down and I believe in that. I think it is the responsibility of government officials from the top down of the entirety of the government. And, I think you could agree. I went to public school, and one of the first things I learned is that there are three branches of government. And I think all three branches did get salaries or salary adjustments at the top levels, and were given large sums. And so do you agree and support in excluding 32-166 as part of the law in principle?
We're not familiar with 116.
So that's actually in the bill that we're talking about today. And what that does is it excludes the salary increases for the judiciary, of which they got hefty raises as well, and they were appropriated $510,000 in excess of the allotment already given to them for their raises, to include retro. And what I bring up today, sir, is that we all have the people's interest in mind, and when I'm speaking, it's not in contrary to your point, but just in fairness to provide all the information so that the people can make informed decisions when they speak about these issues.
I think that was the same argument that the good Senator Espaldon was making. Who's getting paid what, and are you going to include these people, and are the judges not doing good enough, and why are they included? I mean, we got to stick with the main, I think, premise of this bill, which is to repeal the raises that took place. If you want to start parsing it out to, well, what are we going to do with the mayors, and then what are we going to do with the judges, and what are we going to do with all of this? Again, if that's part of the bill, I guess then that should be deliberated on the floor by you people, and then it's decided from there. But I am in favor of this because, like Mr. Leonguero said, I think it has the best chance of doing right by by repealing 32 dash, or the pay raises of 2014. Sorry.
Yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier about eating the elephant. This is the first bite. If the second bite is to be the courts or the mayors or different departments, that's up to you guys right there. But if you take it one bite at a time, instead of trying to lump everybody into a group, and that's what I fear will happen, because once we start lumping everybody in like we did last year, we're going to see the same sort of stalemate and chaos. You guys are going to cry alligator tears about how hard you worked to pass a pay raise, but we couldn't get it done. This way you can get it done, and then you claim the moral high ground to be able to do the hard work as you address each different slice of the apple. Because now once you take Bill 4 and pass it, then if this body decides that the next bite is going to be the OPA, or the next bite's going to be the AG, or the next bite's going to be the mayor, focus on one group that has a lot in common. Because when you do it one group at a time, where apples to apples, and says, okay, we're going to roll back the judges and the mayors, they don't have anything in common. You and the governor have something in common, But if we're going to say, okay, we're going to roll back the senators and the nurses, we're going to roll back the governor and the heavy equipment operators, we're going to take the police and the mayors, you're not going to get anywhere. One bite at a time.
How many branches of government do we have, sir?
We have 3.
And each have their heads. And I only bring this up because it is relevant, because I think it goes back to Public Law 32-208.
And where does all the money get allocated from?
And that's what we need to
So you
ask.
see, that's why you guys have to claim the moral high ground before you can go to the judges and say, hey, this is the pot, this is your share of the pot. What you do with your share of the pot is up to you. DPW, this is your share of the pot. The money goes through you. There's a reason why you guys have control of the money and not the governor's office. You guys have control of the money and not the judiciary branch. You make the policy, they execute it. You make the laws, they enforce it. It's very clear. And that's why we're talking to you one bite at a time, Bill 4, and then if you want to introduce subsequent bills to address each other area, then do so. But to take everybody and lump them in like we saw last year, you only do that so long before you get tired of the squishy sound your head makes banging it into the wall. So quit banging your heads into the wall, one bite at a time.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Speaker.
I noticed that the next set of speakers would have addressed a protocol issue, which I'm glad that they did. And so why don't I invite on the list that they had former Senator Tony Etta, former Senator Chris Duenas, former Senator Manas Tyron, former Senator Tony Lamarena, former Senator Joanne Brown, and as long Senator Klitzke, do you wish to join them? Vice Speaker Nelson, do you wish to speak? Okay, all right. Okay, Senator McCready, just grab another seat. Are there any other former senators in the room? Senator Tony Etta, you were first on the list. Somebody check the mic.
Thank you. Hafaday, Mr. Chairman, and hafaday to your fellow committee members. For the record, my name is Vicente Toniata, and I thank you and this august body for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 4-34. Being a senator at the time of the passage of Public Law 32-208, of which Bill 4-34 intends to amend, gives me a unique insight that also prompts me to provide testimony here today against this bill. Since the passage of Public Law 32-208 from 2.5 to almost 3 years ago, there have approximately been 10 bills proposed by this legislature to amend the existing law in some fashion or repeal it altogether. And all attempts have failed. I make that statement up front to set the tone for the rest of my testimony. I'm not about to get into the politics of those past failures to amend or repeal Public Law 32-208, but rather speak to you from my perspective as a former senator that passed the most controversial bill into public law. Whenever we as a community speak about leadership in government, it is with the desire that those who aspire to that leadership position be the most qualified and vetted by the community, either through public hearings such as this, and of course through the democratic voting process of an election year. We as a community also expect many things from our leaders, elected and appointed, and hold them to a higher standard and level of scrutiny that most citizens of Guam aren't exposed to. Private life is no longer private life. They sacrifice their time, for it is no longer theirs, and their reputation and those of their families are constantly under a microscope. With all these known and expected challenges, why would someone ever step forward and raise their hand to serve as a leader in our community? For the same reason that you are sitting there as committee chairman and as committee members. It is the same reason that I became a senator in the Guam legislature. It comes from the purest desire to make a difference, to sincerely serve, and to be a part of making true on the dream of a better Guam for its people, in whatever way one can. The issue of a salary pay raises for government leadership positions is sorely misunderstood. If it is based simply on the assumption by those who would say that it is means to increase the financial worth of the individual in those positions, no elected official has ever become rich or wealthy in 2 or 4 year term, maybe even a lesser time for those who are appointed. And while salaries shouldn't be a major factor in deciding to become an elected or appointed official, the reality of it is that we, as a government, are in competition for the best and brightest that our island has to offer. I dare say that many individuals in our community who are just as qualified for the various elected and appointed leadership positions do not heed the call to offer to serve simply because the private sector, and yes, even the U.S. government, provides for their family with a more stable career, a better salary, and greater benefits that commensurate with their experience and the expectations of their position. And without the constant public scrutiny and the higher standards and the sacrifices necessary to be a government leader. It takes someone with an extraordinary sense of community and commitment to be a leader in government. Someone like you, the committee members before me. While there are organizations within the community that are exercising their civic duty, challenging the passage of Public Law 32-208, and polling a portion of the community and from that drawing support for their argument against the current law, I have not heard any polls from any organization being conducted of government leaders, past and present, surveying about how they feel about the salary pay raise increase. there are always two sides to every argument, and I take a certain liberty, yet state confidently when I say that if such a poll were conducted, my statements would be supported by those findings. However, in the absence of such a poll, a recent op-ed article in one of the local print media news outlets by Mr. Joe Duenas summarized this point best. In closing, I'd like to state that the committee members here and the rest of your colleagues in the 34th Guam legislature are in an unenviable position regarding this bill on Public Law 32-208. In a sense, I'm speaking to the choir when I shared my reasons for my opposition to Bill 4-34. All of you know better than most what sacrifices it takes to lead at the highest levels of our government. I was present at and supported the passage of Public Law 32-208 into law as a senator of the Guam legislature. I still support that law as a private citizen for the reasons enumerated earlier. And because of those reasons, I cannot support Bill 4-34. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this time. Sedus Maasi, and God bless.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Duenas.
It's deciding when to work. There it is. No, it was operating it properly. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Senators. Nice to see you this evening. Recently I had the pleasure and the opportunity to go down to the state of Palau and represent the governor during the inauguration of President Maga'Låhan. And I was so moved by a testimony by his daughter that I'd like to read that into the record because it reflects exactly a subject that we're talking about tonight. But prior to doing that, I'll introduce myself. I am Chris Duenas, and I appear before you tonight in opposition to Bill 434. Greetings and a very beautiful morning to you all. I am Mayumi Ramagasao, the youngest of 5. Me, my sister Lali, and my older brothers Ishao, TJ, and the biggest baby of our beloved mom, you guessed it, Tommy. All jokes aside, our dad's love for Palau is so deep that if he ever gets cut, he bleeds blue and yellow, the very colors of our flag. He works 24 hours, 7 days a week for the Palauan people. This term will be his last, of which we kids are excited because we will finally get to spend 24/7 with him. Our family already has 5 grandchildren, so we really need our dad's help in babysitting. Our dad really loves to fish, but his uncles are the ones who do all the fishing because he's too busy leading our beautiful nation. Although he may not have time to fish these days, he believes and works to conserve our environment, culture, and heritage. You probably all know his motto, preserve the best and improve the rest. And he has always said, we do not inherit the environment from our ancestors, we are borrowing it from our future generations. We need to think about our future. Our dad has strongly valued family and community. Let me tell you a story. Every time I would accompany my dad on trips, he would always just leave me there. I would look around and find him chatting with my uncle. I'd look around again and find him with constituents. I would also find him grabbing a chew from my auntie's bag. And then I would get surprised because I would hear his laughter as he was playing with the children and advising them. The moral of this short story is that our dad truly sees the importance of building relationships. He has always advised the Palauan youth to build strong ties with each other because the reason why we have survived all these years is because of our inner reliance, helping each other, especially during times of need. And we have come together to preserve our Palauan culture. I am so proud of my dad because I know his job is not easy. He perseveres and remains humble throughout the past 32 years of service to present day in office. If you really had to choose what his specialty is, it is indeed public servitude. In closing, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for giving our dad another chance to serve in the 10th constitutional government and would like to ask everyone in joining me in welcoming my role model, a fellow grassroots president, Tommy Remengesau Jr. I read this into the record because I can tell you that at the inauguration, there were over 300 folks, including delegations from Korea, China, Taiwan, international individuals, and especially amongst the wives and amongst little children. But the wives, you could see an emotional and a display of emotion with tears, and to even look at the president and his wife, to see them, first of all, being proud of their daughter, who gathered herself from time to time to make this speech and introduce her father. And as I went to some of the celebrations afterward, I met with traditional leaders and others, and I kind of asked, that was a beautiful introduction. What do you think the outpouring of emotion was? And they all said, as you know and others know, public service is a calling. And I know that you in this panel and the governor and lieutenant governor, and nobody ever should ask to be patted on the back or to be told, it's incredible that you go out and sacrifice to serve and to lead our people. But the fact of the matter is service does take a toll, and the entire family serves when people step up to serve our people. And in closing, I would say that is why I've come to the realization, and as far as I'm concerned, I believe that these pay scales that were put together, and we have HR professionals that will speak to this in later panels. These pay scales were publicly heard. These pay scales were put together through a Hayes study. These pay scales were vetted. And I dare to say, because it's not right to point at anybody else in public service for whatever reason they've taken their path, in higher education, in utilities, in other leadership positions. The fact of the matter is this pay scale is relatively modest compared to a lot of leadership positions that do not require the work that you folks do, and that the governor and lieutenant governor do, having responsibility for this island 24/7 for every day, every minute that they are in elected office. That is simply a fact, and it's simply true. And I think that Senator Estevez, I'm glad that you brought that to light. I know that you weren't taking a position, but I think it was fair to put that on the table, that there was a pay scale that was evaluated, and that there is a comparison within territories and regional governments to show that the unique situation that exists and the compensation that was arrived at by the Department of Administration is correct. And I believe you should be paid that. And I certainly believe the governor, lieutenant governor, and all these wonderful colleagues and professionals behind me certainly do earn their pay and deserve what they're getting paid. And I believe that they are truly making this island go forward, and you will continue to see, the people of Guam will continue to see the fruits of our labor. In closing, I would also like to say, this is not about us. And even with some of the comments by others in the panel before us to speak to, I think you're going to hear a theme tonight from our team and from people who come forward saying to keep these salaries intact, that we're not fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the positions. We're fighting for the executive branch of government and the legislature, who will be here long after we leave office and long after we are not appointed and confirmed by this legislature to serve anymore. So I thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony this evening, and I stand ready to answer any questions that you may have. Situs Masi.
Thank you very much. Senator Mana.
Hofade, Speaker B.J. Cruz, and members of this esteemed body, thank you for this opportunity to offer my testimony. I am here today in strong opposition to this measure and any bill that seeks to reduce the salaries of members of this body, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and my fellow cabinet members. I have to state from the onset that the Competitive Wage Act of 2014 doesn't apply to my position. My salary is set by the GITA board, and therefore I come here with a sole intent to defend the salaries of those who serve in these positions of leadership in the two branches of government. Each of you in this committee know full well how difficult the job of a senator is and the level of sacrifice that goes along with it, from coming out of pocket to support our constituents in need, to supporting almost every worthwhile cause that gets brought to your attention. And there's a sacrifice of your personal life and the time spent with your families. It's no easy feat providing representation to the community and having to meet all the demands. And I must respectfully say, it takes a whole lot more than being able to fog a mirror and gather a few signatures. Each of you hold a position of respect and huge responsibility and is absolutely deserving of your pay. And if you don't defend the hard work that you do, I feel I must. Once you're elected a senator, that title stays with you for life. So I feel compelled to defend this body and perhaps say what you cannot, whether you feel it or not. You should not support this effort to roll back your salaries or anyone else's. With much discussion focused on the salaries of our elected and appointed government officials, one must consider what can be done to remove these self-limiting mindsets and create a community which is elevated and driven to new heights. In my cursory review of the last 3 legislatures, I counted at least 17 bills that deal with the salaries and or the Competitive Wage Act of 2014. In the 32nd Guam legislature, there were 5 bills introduced, 8 in the 33rd, and in the 34th Guam legislature, out of the 19 bills introduced, 4 are related to this very issue. Is that the will of the people? There's so much talk about decreasing the salaries of those in the legislature and in the executive branch, but what does this do to the image of our elected officials and the respect the public has for these positions of leadership? How does this constant degradation inspire our children and future leaders to aspire to lead and take on one of these elected or appointed positions? We each are given a job of selecting our governor, lieutenant governor, senators, and mayors to represent the needs of our community. These positions of leadership come with great trust and responsibility, and I believe it's because of this these individuals whom we appoint should be paid accordingly. So it should be our goal to entice the highest caliber of individuals to these positions, since they'll be responsible for resolving a lot of these issues that face our community. At the same time, we should challenge our lawmakers and each other to ensure there's parity and competitive salaries also offered to teachers, nurses, and others throughout the government. We spend so much time encouraging our children to pursue higher education, instilling aspirations for success in the job market, but these same children are forced to move off island because the limited number of Guam jobs offering competitive wages, this being both in the public and private sectors. During a previous public hearing on this same pay issue, a quote was presented from an article written in the state legislature's magazine entitled Pay Problems, written by Morgan Cullen, who tracks legislator compensation for the National Conference of State Legislatures. It reads, maintaining adequate compensation promotes diversity amongst elected officials, so the entire population is adequately represented. If pay is a significant barrier to public service, many potential candidates will not be able to serve in the legislature. Salaries should be enough to attract highly qualified candidates with a variety of diverse backgrounds and experiences, while also ensuring every rich and poor can afford to serve. Legislators essentially serve as a board of directors for our state government. It's clear that with higher salaries, you can get a broader range of people serving in the legislature that more accurately reflect the population as a whole. Salary increases also encourage people with higher education attainment and professional expertise. Now, this speaks to each of the elected and appointed positions, and I must say also speaks to the entire workforce. So I ask, shouldn't we now shift the conversation and challenge each other to lift our island to new heights, to create a job market which is attractive, competitive, and successful? The answer is not to sit as a crab in a basket and keep each other down. Tainamasi.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Lamarina.
Thank you, Speaker. My name is Alberto Lamarina V. I proudly serve as the Director of the Department of Corrections. For many of you who don't know me, I've served 30 years in the government of Guam. I've led 5 agencies, and I've had the opportunity to serve 3 terms in the Guam legislature. I've seen how the government works on both sides of the table. And it's more than getting signatures. and it's more than just not having a criminal record. You know, there's an old saying that you need to walk a mile in someone's shoes to get a general idea of what they go through. Every individual in this room, every senator in this room, every director, deputy director, if there are any mayors back here, all have a job to be done. When the Hay study was done and commissioned by then Senator Felix P. Camacho, who was a former Civil Service Commission Director, which I also was a former Civil Service Commission Director, believed that compensation should not be based on politics, but compensation should be based on parity. It should be based on the work that you perform. So when the study was done, it took all the position descriptions of every single government employee, regardless of classification, be they classified, unclassified, elected. Of course, the senators, I believe, opted not to be included in that study. But the reality was that they looked at every single position description. The Hay Group did a study and came out with their findings on the proper compensation. Again, senators, compensation should be about parity. Compensation should be about the work performed. You know, as a former director of the Civil Service Commission, I remember back in, as we look back in history, Joe Atta, then Governor Joe Atta, also did a similar study. And of course, the same situation has happened with the study that Governor Camacho did, was that the senators were in a quandary. Because the reality is the study was not for the purposes of compensating individuals for how many years they served in the government of Guam, but it was based upon the work that they performed and based on the national averages. So when then Governor Atta, and it came to the legislature, certain, and I know it because when Governor Camacho's bill was passed, they were calling the Civil Service Commission. Senior employees in the government of Guam were saying, well, I'm 25, 30 years in the government. Why is a guy who only has been serving for 2 years getting a $6,000 pay raise and I'm only getting $2,000? And remember, this is not pay raises. The word raise should not even be used. It should be just compensation. Just compensation based upon the study done. But what the study showed was that entry-level positions in the government of Guam were below standard, below the 85th percentile. The senior employees who've served time were at standard. That's the reason why they didn't get as large an increase. You have to remember, if a director serves 8 years for a governor who has been elected to 2 terms, gets no increment. When Joanna and I were directors under Joe Atta's administration, and then we became senators, we used to joke about, what, Joanne? We didn't get a pay raise for 14 years, right? Oh, 18 years, okay. But the reality is directors don't get an increment. If you get an employee who is employed with the government of Guam for 8 years, depending upon how new they are in the government of Guam, will get between 4 and 7 personnel evaluations and possibly 4 to 7 increments. It's only natural that employees down the line who become career employees will eventually make as much or even more than their directors, regardless if you passed the pay adjustments. So it's really about equity. It's really about parity. It's really about the work that is performed. I remember when I was a senator and after work I used to go down to the late senator. He was a great man. Senator Joe Rivera of Dedido. And I used to go to his house. And I'll be sitting there, talking about our day. And, man, his house was like Grand Central Station. I used to tell his son, Larry, people are just coming in and out. He'll tell his wife, June, put more water in the soup. Because, people who were homeless needed something to eat. As public servants, our job never ends. Those of you who have been senators for a while, and those of you who are new to this, you're already experiencing it. Try going to cost you less. And try shopping. Tell your spouses, go ahead because I got to talk to people. Joanne and I used to go walking at Paseo. And when we got elected senators, we could do 10 rounds in an hour. But when we became senators, we did 1 round in an hour because everyone wanted to talk to us. Yeah, true. So really, public service granted. People expect public servants to get peanuts. But the reality is they should be compensated justly for the work that they perform, just like anybody else. That's all it's all about. Forget the politics. Look at the study. Look at the recommendations of the Hague Group. I mean, they didn't pull numbers out of the air. They evaluated each position, each job that they had to perform. And then some people say, well, this should only be for classified employees. Well, the purpose for classified employees is, one, is you qualify for the job. And secondly, you're protected under the Civil Service Commission from political interference. So you have the privilege of going to the commission and be protected by the commission. But unclassified employees also, most of us, I know I did, came before you. If you had a problem with my qualifications, it should have been addressed then. That was the opportunity of this body to decide if I qualified for the position or not. You also have the possibility of calling oversight hearings to question our management of our various agencies. But also take into consideration that every single director and deputy in this room has a position description. A job that they need to get done. A job that was evaluated by the Hague Group, and an evaluation that set the just compensation for the work done. And like I said, as a former director of the Civil Service Commission, we always want to make sure that employees are compensated justly for the work that they do. It shouldn't be just about classified, unclassified, or elected. It's the entire government of Guam. Don't tell me that none of you up there feel that you work 24/7. I sleep with my phone next to my bed because you never know what's going to happen at DOC. Just like, and Civil Service Commission too. But the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, is that I've lost my train of thought because I was interrupted by someone speaking behind me. But the reality is, again, is it's not about politics. It's parity. I mean, that's the bottom line. Thank you.
Senator Brown.
Does it work? The light's good? Okay. I'm going to vote for you, Senator Tony Lamarena, if you ever run again. Darn. Kind of forgot how good an orator you were. It's been a while. Thank you very much, Speaker B.J. Cruz, and congratulations on your speakership. You know, this is an interesting process. Certainly those of us, we're the old war horses, as we call ourselves, because we've been around a long time. And I'm just a year behind Tony. When you look to the future, because our careers pretty much for those of us that are where we are in government is coming to an end sooner than later. I think back as a young person what inspired me to want to work in the government of Guam, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to try this for a few years and then I'm going to go on to bigger and better things. I had no idea all these years later that I would be in a position even to retire from the government of Guam, because it was not my ambition as a young person. I was in graduate school, and I came back. I had a Japanese politics class, and I came back, and I interviewed a number of people in the private sector and tourism, because my paper was focused on Japanese investment in Guam after World War II, because I thought it was fascinating. Here we were just a generation or two before at war, and then by the late 60s, early 1970s, we had this vast Japanese investment. Japan more than anyone else. Of course, back in the 70s also, we had tremendous investment of land acquisitions by Korean citizens. But that's what my paper was on. So I had an opportunity to talk to people in the tourism industry. And then I said, well, I should go interview the governor of Guam, because the governor of Guam, the government has a role in this process. I should go talk to Governor Joe Atta. And the first thing he asked me is, where have you been? And I said, well, I'm off at school, and I'm just here for Easter break, and you're on my list to interview, and I wanted to get your thoughts on Japanese investment on Guam and the tourism industry, and we talked about that. And he said, Joanne, what are your plans after this? And I said, well, hopefully I will graduate this December. And he said, why hopefully? Are you going to graduate or are you not? And I said, I will graduate, sir. Never thought he was that quick. Kind of surprised me with that. And he said, well, good, because I'd like you to come and join my administration. Geez, I thought I was there to interview him. I didn't think he was there to interview me. And I didn't think that from that conversation, my future, here we are 29 years later, would be here. I've always had a passion for public service. That isn't something anyone taught me. I think I probably, if I did, I just absorbed it from my grandfather, who was barely 5 feet tall. My Chamorro grandfather probably influenced me to want to serve Guam, because he was so passionate about Guam. And I appreciate that, because I don't think I could do what I do or have done what I did to run for 6 terms and serve in this legislature if I didn't have that desire. And it was at $55,000 a year. And there was even one year it was at 30% pay cut. And had I been with a house mortgage, I wouldn't have been able to pay it that year. It's unfortunate, and the dialogue and the back and forth. There's no new ground any of you, including you new ones that have only been doing this for a few weeks, have walked. We've all walked this. We were members of the legislature that cut the Guam legislature from what, a $22 million a year budget to 6. We were the legislature that voted for the initiative that reduced the membership from 21 to 15. We didn't have leased cars, that the legislatures before us had. We didn't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees in Central that didn't show up to work. This is not new, this debate about, let's cut ourselves so much because we want to show the people our true love and dedication, that we can survive on thin air. I don't know. There's a lot of people who have mortgages to pay. There are people putting their kids through school. I've got one I've got to worry about years from now who's going to be in college when I can hopefully still work. But we all have those responsibilities. Maybe some are blessed, maybe you're fortunate and, you live off mom and dad's pension or assets and you don't have to work. Most people have to work for a living. I certainly do. At the end of the day, if you want to encourage and have the quality, and some people say, I heard one of you senators comment on an interview that, there's no shortage of people to serve in these positions. Of course not. I could put out a job announcement for stevedore, and I can have 100 people apply. Put out a job announcement to be governor of Guam. How many people apply? Put out a job announcement to run for senator. How many people apply? You think the few that run, really, when you get down to it, a population 170, 180,000 people, we get 30, 40? That's a great number? As elaborated by some of the members here, most people don't stand up to be counted, quite frankly. To put your lives out there for public display, the impacts that happen to your family. I'm not kidding. I don't know how many dinners I sat down with my family. I'd be out at a public restaurant and be interrupted. And I don't mean cordially, hey, by the way, Senator, can I make an appointment? I have this issue. No. Just start talking to me in front of my family while we're trying to eat. And I know it's frustrating for them because they didn't sign up for this. But this whole dialogue that, oh, we cut our salaries down, that's the goodness. We really did something for the government of Guam and the people of Guam today. Let's not kid ourselves, senators. It's nice Tony talks about leaving at night. I remember leaving this place the following morning. I remember the Friday nights here, leaving here Saturday morning, starting it's Friday morning and leaving Saturday morning when the sun came up because we went through 4 or 5 renditions of the budget for that year. I know what at least I haven't looked at recent budgets for us, the government of Guam, but back then I got a certainly bird's eye view of the entire budget of the government of Guam, the salaries of almost every employee in the government of Guam. And I thought, what the heck am I doing here? This idea that somehow we cut out a few thousand here and a few thousand there because we want to self-sacrifice and be beloved is going to be a great solution to the people of Guam. God, you're in for a big surprise, especially you new ones. You have no clue what's coming yet when you have to deal with that budget. And I was there at a time when we were dealing with barely agreeing on a $500 million budget. Within 10 years, we're almost, 8? Getting closer to $900 million? That would have been unheard of during our time. So this idea that, oh no, we've got to get more revenue and do all this before we can, address the salaries of the senators or address the salaries of directors. I don't know what great benefit is going to be gained by having directors, for example, in our case, I mean, of course, I'm at the port, but have subordinates who have no direct responsibility to anyone, including the people of Guam. And I don't mean in a negative way. That's just how this government's structured. I don't know why public service has continuously been degraded and public servants degrade the position. I don't understand what is gained by that at the end of the day. A soundbite is gone like that. Today's paper's yesterday's news. Evening, by then, 10, 11 o'clock, you forget, unless you look the next day, it's gone. The long-term impacts, because would the young Joanne Brown now want to do public service? If I looked at now, I don't know. I'd really have to think about it, because I'd have to deal with all of this nonsense. And am I capable? Am I competent? Am I educated? Can I take an organization and make it function more effectively and efficiently and deliver on its mission? Yes, I can. I've done it several times. It's hard work. It's difficult. I don't get to pick my team. Senators, you get to pick your team. You get to decide who your staffers are. I don't. I have to walk into an existing organization, make it move, and deliver. Because we do have, in my case, definitely, we have to deliver something every day. We have to perform. But this whole idea, if we want to talk about democratic government, me who has my degrees in political science and my master's in political science with government, the whole process under which the people have a direct ability to influence how the government runs is through their elected officials. It's through the governor when they elect the executive. It's certainly through you as members of the legislative body. And it's through that process that they influence government. The old days when, I know the governor, used to be your qualifications and your credentials. I mean, we had people that had the nerve to get up in public in federal forums and make that comment. How'd you get your, I know the governor. Well, darn, welcome to the club. I mean, thousands of people on Guam know the governor. We don't get to do that anymore. We actually have to have capabilities. We actually have to work hard at what we do. And if we don't, we can very easily be removed. I have no idea what job security is. I don't know what overtime is. I don't know what time and a half is or hazardous pay. I have no clue what any of those things are because I've never experienced it. At the end of the day, I have to bank on my own performance and deliver on that in order to do my job well so that my bosses at the end of the day decide that, yes, you are who we want to keep doing this job. But to continue to think that cutting the pays of be it the legislature, the governor, in this case, I know it's not directed toward the directors, but there are other versions that are intended and have been intended to do that. Who wants the job? Seriously, you can always get people who will, oh, hell yeah, I want to be the boss. I want to be in charge because, wow, that makes me somebody real important. I don't know. I think being the boss sometimes is a pretty tough job. I don't like sleeping with my phone. I'd love to turn it on mute. I don't get to do that. And there's a lot of other directors every day that don't get to do that. And then this idea to create this inequity. I mean, I was there when the original reclassification happened in the government of Guam with the Hayes study back in the 1980s. Back then, earning $90,000 as a governor was probably a big deal, big time, because other directors and deputy positions were down at the 40s, 36, 38,000. All that has changed. And if you, as you do, look at the salary compensation for all the different department and agencies in the government of Guam, heck, when I was sitting in your chair, the governor's secretary that scheduled his agenda for the day made more than me. Really? Hell, the heck with going in. My parents could have saved a lot. They didn't have to go worry and sacrifice to send me off to college. It's the future of where we're going. It's not those of us that are in the sunset time heading out. It's the future of where we're going. And if you want to inspire young people to work hard, as we did, because we were the young generation, we were running departments in our 20s. Me and a number of other department directors. I know Senator Aguon knows what it's like to be one of those young directors back in the day during his administration. And we did very well. We had a wonderful start in our lives and in our careers that has served us very well. And we're skilled and we're experienced. Not that many people of a Tony Lamorena's character walking around. I would hate if and thank God I never have to make that decision. I feel for any future governor of Guam. If I hadn't felt even the ones I didn't like, I feel for them, because running for office is the most difficult job interview you will ever have. I don't know if I get elected again. I don't know. Maybe I'll try. Who knows? But I will never know that for myself. I mean, you got to go out there and do it. That is the toughest. You know, everyone says, oh, no, classified service. Yeah, I just got to impress a panel of 2 or 3 people, maybe 4 or 5. Really? Especially some of you, Senator Saunders, any of you have tried it more than once. It's tough. You know, the beauty contest ain't all that easy. Please select me. But to continue to degrade this democratic process under which the people actually have a means of influencing policy or how their government is administrated, that's why candidates have their agenda. This is what I'm going to do if you elect me. This is what I'm going to improve upon. And yet we denigrate that process and we try to diminish the people that do it. And somehow feel that makes us somebody. I don't know where we're going with this. Because in the overall, you're going into close to $900 million budget for the government. My goodness. And we used to debate to barely get it over $500 million. And even though Senator Klitsky's here, he will agree with that, as conservative as he is, who doesn't need to get paid for his public service because he lives on air. He really does. And Diet Pepsi. I don't know if he still does, but back then he did. I mean, seriously. 45, whatever it is, a month, what it costs to pay for this building. And this building used to cost a lot more than $45,000 a month. I remember, because we even cut it further than what it was back then. Really? And argue that we're not going to do this, we're going to sacrifice until, you know, the world is wonderful. The demands will never end, the responsibilities will never end, you will never have enough money to do all the things that most people want to do. Welcome to the real world of legislating and budgeting. But at the end of the day, if the desire is to diminish the capacity that you sit in, diminish the people that sacrifice, because it ain't just us. I'm sorry, but who's here with their family tonight? And our governor, I mean, even though, and there's some governors, I didn't vote for, probably future governors I won't care for either, personally. Or, hey, that's not my God, so I didn't vote for him. But the sacrifice that comes is not just considering, what, $130,000? Why don't we ask some of these business executives how much they make? Some of the head of the media companies here, maybe not the reporters, ask how much they make. But they'll be the first ones, oh yeah, cut those, yeah. What do they do? And they're the first ones knocking on your door when they want policy and legislation to benefit them, aren't they? But otherwise you're not worthy. If you're going to stay full-time, then make that choice. If the decision's part-time, then fine. Go part-time and go out and go out and get a real job and pay the mortgage, and we don't have to worry about it. But at the end of the day, those things still have to be paid. And all you're doing is reducing the pool. You know, this last election with the mayors, I have to tell you. You know, remember Landon, the mayor, Nick Francisco Maga'Låhan was my mayor like forever. Nick Francisco, and then, you know, our most recent mayor, Mayor Blas, was there forever. Even though I'm now in Chalampago, I am a product of Maga'Låhan. My family lands in Maga'Låhan. I grew up in Maga'Låhan. Look at this last election. I couldn't even keep track of who was running where. There were so many candidates running. I thought, isn't that wonderful? It shakes up the pot. Even if it's our side majority, I think every now and then we need to just pull the rug up and shake things up, which our people love to do. I thought that was great. People that otherwise I know would have never run for mayor, ran for mayor. And why do we think that is? After 30, 40 years since they were commissioners, it's just some great pull to want to be the mayor of their village? I think the compensation had something to do with that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think it's a very positive way because it motivated a lot of people in our community. Even though you can only have one mayor or one vice mayor if you had a vice mayor, but they ran for office. And is that a terrible thing? A few extra $1,000? And I thought that was wonderful. I'd love to see that for the legislature. But please don't think anybody can fill these. Yeah, anybody can fill these seats, and some of you last a term or two. You know, Joe T., I have to tell you, your dad, Joe T., because he is the only Joe. I mean, you're Joe T., but he is Joe T., who I had the privilege of serving with, and my former colleague Ted, who always out-talked me. My first term I was actually very quiet because I could out-talk Ted. You cannot out-talk Ted. And he looked at us. We're all out here, and we were all young, and we were all new, and we came in mass. We disseminated. We were the new majority in the 21-member legislature from the Ada Blas administration. We were all that. And I remember him walking out here and looking at us, kind of sizing us up and going, you know, you guys are nothing but a bunch of experiments. That is so... Did he just say that to us? Tony, did he say that to us? We're a bunch of... What do you mean? I mean, we've arrived. We got elected. And he says, I'm tried and true. Back then, I was like, what the heck is he talking? Years later, after being here and serving all those terms, I said, I understand what he meant. Yeah, getting elected, good luck to you. Surviving it. Being reelected. And had Joe T. chose to run, sir, you know your dad would have gotten reelected. Hell, I would have voted for him. He's a Democrat. But he would have gotten reelected. And there's something to be said for that. There really is something to be said for that, to have that level of longevity, that the people have that much confidence. Tony Ampinko, who I love and respect very much. Wow. The only person I thought who would beat Tony is maybe Ben Pangilinan. And had he survived, I think maybe Ben would have exceeded the term of Speaker Tony Ampinko. But you know what? They're survivors, and look at the sacrifice. Look at the sacrifice. And yet at the end of the day, we're quarreling about a few pennies on the table and thinking we are, look at all this time and effort because we think we're really going to make a big impact to the lives of the people of Guam. And at the end of the day, we're not. Cut your salaries to nothing. You think that's going to change the realities in government? It's not. Maybe it'll make you feel good because you sacrificed. Public service is sacrifice, my dear people. I think all of you know that. I think your family knows that probably more than you do. And we're arguing that when we've got close to $900 million on the almost twice the budget I dealt with in my last term 11 years ago. I think we need to change the dialogue and look on how we're going to invest and build rather than how we're going to tear down and destroy and diminish. We love to diminish. Makes us feel more important. At what cost? And to anyone here who wants to criticize, stand up. You know what I say? Stand up and be counted. I can complain the rest of my life. I can come here or anywhere else because you know what? I've served my time. I've sacrificed. Like Tony said, 18 years. I didn't earn 1 penny more for 18 years. But I made that choice. That was my choice. But to go this direction, I'm sorry, but I look at the rest of the government of Guam. Do you really think in a government agency that the director should earn less than his or her subordinates that have less responsibility and less ultimate accountability to run an organization? Do you think that individual is going to be motivated to do the best that they can? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I work harder now than I ever have, much harder than I did as a member of the Guam legislature. Because I actually do have to deliver every day. So I hope you think about that in your deliberations. Because they are much, and I know this gets all the media attention for some of you. I've had some colleagues that were number 1 vote, number 2 vote getters. You know, their ambitions were already down at Adelup before they even got through their first term in the Guam legislature. And sometimes before that term ended, everything just came tumbling down. Yeah. I don't know, that's how I look at it at the end of the day. And I really hope that you take that. Some of you are not. I mean, am I going to convince Senator San Nicolas? Probably not. It's his agenda, that's fine. Others of you that might be open to it, I hope you think about that. Think about the future of the young people that we tell to go out there to work hard and get educated. My parents never went looking for a job for me. My parents never worked for the government of Guam. And they sure as heck didn't go, hey, Nana, man, can you hire my daughter? So she can't find her own job by herself. No, I went out there and I worked very hard. Thank you, Governor Atta, for the opportunity to walk through the door. And he gave me that, and he gave many of us young people that opportunity. And I've worked from there. And I think there are many other young people out there that we want to encourage to work hard and get educated. Like you, Senator Espaldon, you went back to law school many years later. That's admirable, especially as we're older. God, I thought of going back and being a student. I don't know if I could do it anymore, but I admire those that do. I admire those that go to school and have children and other obligations, elderly parents to take care of, and they still go out there and juggle and work and sacrifice. But you know what? We tell people to do that because your life's going to be better. You're going to have better opportunity. And really, we should diminish public service? What, for a soundbite and a few lines in a newspaper so we can wake up in the morning and go, hey, Lania, they quoted me. Wow, I'm important. Look at my name and face in the newspaper today. We've all had that. At the end of the day, does it really matter when I'm on my deathbed, assuming I have time to think about it? Am I going to be thinking about that? Hell no. So I hope you consider the dialogue and consider what government you're building. Because if this is all we're going to have, I don't think we have much to offer the future. And the future ain't too far away. So, you know, for those of us that have been here and have been down this road, especially for you new ones, you're going to make your own decisions, I'm sure, as you should, because you're all elected to office. But please ask yourself, what am I doing to build and improve rather than what am I doing to diminish and destroy? Because I think everyone here works hard for their job. I think my boss, my board, I think the governor of Guam, lieutenant governor work very hard. And there will be a lieutenant governor and governor in the future maybe I don't even support personally. But boy, to do that job, I've worked for 2 governors, and I don't know how they do it. You know, people say, oh, they go to social functions. That's not work. Really? Is Governor Calvo home with his family? Is he talking to his kids? Is he there with his wife? Is he reading to his grandchildren? His family's probably looking forward to December of next year. I know some families here are looking forward to December of next year. And you mean to tell me he's not working? And all the things the people of Guam expect him to do? He's not worthy? I don't know anyone's going to equate his election. I think he was up for public judgment. And gosh, I was impressed. I worked for the guy, but I was impressed with the outcome. So I didn't hear a resounding, no, Eddie Calvo, we don't want you. No, Ray Tenorio, we don't want your team. Guys, we got so many bigger issues that we need to work on to continue to dialogue. I don't know any other bill that's gone through this many renditions that we come to the public hearing. Then we're saying, oh, we never publicly hear these bills. I don't know. But like I said, having hindsight here, 2020, I think we should work on building and looking at the real issues of government and how we can operate more efficiently and supporting directors to do their job, supporting those of you that run for elect, because it's no walk in the park. It's hard. It's the hardest job you will ever have. I've had people from the private sector work for this administration. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know you guys. And and I don't play golf on Wednesday afternoon. Come on, guys. I think there's so much more we can dialogue and engage in than this, because to tear down, to diminish, to make this job harder, to make it less desirable, we will lose some good people. Even in the remaining term that's left. And good luck trying to attract for those who have ambitions to run for higher office. You're going to have a harder time attracting good people. You'll always get people. Oh, hell, there's a lot of, hey, I want the job. I want to be in charge. But will they have the wherewithal to do it and do it well? I think that's a bigger question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. It's fine. Senator McCready, thank you. Anybody have any questions of this panel? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I deeply appreciated the testimony from the panel because you all spoke to something that I think everybody up here can definitely relate to. This job is devastatingly hard. What makes it so challenging, especially, is there's always a different perspective on what we believe is right. And as we each try to interpret what that perspective is, especially as elected officials, we try and do so within the context of what we feel is the will of the people who we serve. And oftentimes, it gets very, very difficult to be a representative of the people, especially when a large majority of our people depend on us to represent them, you know, with you being in front and them being in the back, because that's what they elected us to do. And it gets very, very hard to be that person all the time, every single day. And so I deeply appreciate what you guys share, because a lot of us here agree that it is incredibly difficult to do. But I think that the perspective kind of, the sharing of the perspective kind of stops there, at least as far as I'm concerned. Because I don't believe that rolling back the compensation in this instance is a diminishing of anything. I think that it is an elevating. Because if we can go through all this, elected and appointed, and if we can struggle as hard as we do every day, and if we can do it knowing full well that the amount of money that we're getting paid is not what we probably could get elsewhere, but we do it anyway. We do it because we're answering the call to serve our people. And we do it because we're here to lead our island in the best way that we think we can. And maybe if you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars more, you might get a better man than Mike St. Nicholas. I don't doubt it. But I'm going to be the best man that I can be right here and right now. And it's hard because the sacrifices of the family is real. And the pain of our people is real. The pain of our people is very real. And they want us to empathize with that. They want us to understand that. And they vote for us not because we're superior or we're worth more money, but because they want that kind of leadership. At least that's deeply what I believe, and that's why we go through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 versions of this. Because as long as we fail to demonstrate in our priorities that we understand their pain, we're failing them as leaders. And so I ask everybody here to not think of this bill or Bill 11 or any other bill as a diminishment of what we do. All of us, many of us here in this room, I recognize the faces. We took these jobs before the pay went up. And we took them to lead our people. And I'm asking that we demonstrate to our people that that is what is most important to us. That we empathize with their pain and their struggle, and that we lead them, and that we lead this island. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments? I want to thank. I know better.
We're really. You can tell we've served together, right? I do want to make a brief comment because of what you've relayed, Senator St. Nicholas. But at the end of the day, I have to tell you, someone like me to have an extreme of, and I always look at Bob Klitsky because Bob's can be, like I said, Bob lives on air. That's why he's so tall. And Tony and I, as much as we're friends, and we were friends before we came to the Guam legislature, we served hand in hand during the Atabla's administration. We don't always agree. We didn't always agree in this body. But you know what? That's why it's a deliberative body. Each and every one of us think we represent the people of Guam. Trust me, we all feel that because we were elected by them. But at the end of the day, that's where everyone's input. And everyone is not, you guys obviously aren't all going to agree on this or any other issue. And that's where the deliberative process and the debate and the engagement comes in, and we work to try and sway and influence each other. And at the end of the day, then something comes out of that. All in favor say aye. When they go down the voting list, yay, nay, abstain, whatever, that's the outcome of that process. Everyone believes, I'm sure there's not one of you that don't believe you were elected to do the best for the people of Guam. But it's a deliberative process, and that's when everybody's input, everyone's thoughts, everyone's ideas come into play, and at some point, majority vote will be made, and that decision will move on. So continue to do what you do in your mission. Everyone has a different part of this community that they represent, and at the end of the day, you vote on it. That's the process. It's not one of us. It's a collective majority vote at the end of the day, and if you get the governor to agree, then you don't have to get a few more votes to override a veto. See, thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank the panel. The next panel is Mr. Gillen, Chief St. Nicholas, Chief Cruz, Christine Boletto, Chuck Ada.
Doing it again. Shit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here to testify, as you can imagine, against Bill 434, as was introduced by Senator Aguon. Sometimes you in your attempts to please everyone, you please no one. And this bill really denigrates, use the term, Senator Brown, the value of the work that you do and the value of the work that the governor and the lieutenant governor do. I've lived on Guam almost 45 years, seen a lot of senators come and go. Some are no longer with us. I know how difficult your jobs are. When we talk, and it's almost not worth the time to read through this because a lot of the things that have already been said are being said in this testimony. You new senators, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting all of you, but you're in for a very interesting experience. You don't own your lives anymore. You don't have a lot of time with your families. You're constantly being asked, prodded, pushed, second-guessed. And believe me, folks, it takes a lot more than just being able to breathe and get 250 signatures to do this job and do it right. And I know a lot of you, and I admire the work that you do and the effort that has to be put into this. And you're worth every penny, and probably even more. I think there's a problem with reaching over into the executive branch and the executive privilege to tell the governor and the lieutenant governor how much their job is worth. The Hay study did that already. I think we have to now, if you want to go back and correct this, because what was the term, original sin? Just absolve it right now. Forget it. Let's move on. We keep beating this thing to death. I admire your position. It wasn't a question, but I admire your statement, Senator St. Nicholas, that we start showing the people that we're resolved and that we're committed to sacrifice. You sacrifice every day. The compensation, the value of the work is important. And the dollar value is important, not the ultimate, okay? But at least it recognizes it to some extent how difficult the job is. When I first took this job, and I had a long history in public health and health insurance, and spent a lot of my time in this business. But when I took the job in 2011, I had to do what the military calls get smart. I had to learn all of the things that had gone on since I had left public health. And I would work 12-hour days, and I would work on weekends. And I thought I was working hard until I staffed the governor one day. I couldn't believe how hard that man works and how he does it almost every day. And you all do similar things, okay? Your time is not your own. All of the social events, the scope and breadth of the work that you do, the decisions that you make that will affect generations. And you don't think that this compensation is fair and should be rolled back? I just have a lot of difficulty with that. I understand that there are a group of a small, loud minority of people who are saying that this is wrong, there's something wrong with the process, and as a result of that, there's something wrong with all of us. Some real dark, dirty thing happened, and that's not true. These pay scales were promulgated and duly set. Somebody decided to enforce them and enact them. Okay, I'm not here to talk about my salary or the salary of my fellow directors and deputy directors. I'm talking about your salaries, and I'm talking about the governor and the lieutenant governor. They're worth every penny. You are worth every penny. New ones, you're going to realize that even that compensation may not be enough because you've just given up a good part of your lives for at least the next 2 years. And the things that you do and the policies that you make affect people you haven't met and probably will never, ever meet. And you have to consider that when you consider whether we should roll back this compensation plan. I urge you to vote no on this when and if it gets to the floor. Thank you for the opportunity to make this statement.
Chief Snickley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to this 34th Guam legislature. And thank you for allowing me to be here today to present this testimony. But before I begin, I just want to put a disclaimer out that you're going to hear a lot of repetition. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to prove that this has happened many times over before. And so with that, thank you again for this opportunity to present testimony once again on the issues of salaries. This testimony is in opposition of Bill 4-34, an act to repeal the salaries of the governor, lieutenant governor, and the senators of the Guam legislature. In fact, this testimony is against any bill that would do the same. Elected and cabinet positions in the government of Guam are executive-level management positions that merit executive-level compensation. It is a simple justification exemplified in every private, federal, and military organization. It has taken over 23 years for the government of Guam to take a huge step towards finally catching up with the rest of the world. Higher caliber leaders were leaving the government, or our island for that matter, for the opportunities commensurate to their education, skills, and abilities that they have worked hard to gain. Implementing the Competitive Wage Act of 2014 made these positions now competitive to attract, recruit, and retain the best qualified and talented leaders to deal with the challenges today. Now, I am not a senator, but our worlds are parallel in many ways. I have witnessed firsthand the burdens and the demands your positions hold. You have a critical role in the direction of our island. You answer to the people, or at least to the 12,000 to 21,000 voters who came out in the general election of 2016. Regardless if they voted or not, the people place demands on you that are often opposite of what the person just asked of you an hour before. You get stopped at church, at the store when picking up something for dinner on the way home, at the beach on your designated family day, or at a get-together where all you want to do is spend time with the loved ones. While you may leave the office at 5 p.m., 5 p.m., your mind is still working, carrying the stress wherever you go, including the weekends. You don't get to turn it off. And might I add, I just remembered, Senator Talahi, today's your birthday. Happy birthday. That's an example of the sacrifices that you have to pay for this position. We'll sing to you later, Senator. This is the same of all high-level executive positions in federal, military, private, and government organizations, and compensated at executive levels above their subordinates. Your position deserves the current salary, maybe even more, including the governor and the lieutenant governor positions as well. You are the highest and most prestigious positions of your branch. The judicial branch properly compensates their executive positions. Use them as an example. Now, whether you as the individual sitting in the position deserve it will depend on your performance. And your bosses, the voters, will determine that in the next election. The majority wants you to focus on real issues facing our island, not an issue that has been heard over and over again for the past 3 years, which many of you have accepted and approved in one form or another, showing that you agree with the value of these elected positions. The Competitive Wage Act was implemented in 2014, and since then we have had 3 budget bills that have been touted as balanced with a near unanimous vote to prove it. Within these recent budgets, specifically in Bill number 37-33, the full implementation of the Competitive Wage Act was funded and received an aye vote from every incumbent senator that made it into the 34th Guam legislature. The point that I am making is that you have approved these salaries, and by passing the bill, you have funded it. I understand that you cannot change the numbers, but if your resolve was real and your convictions were strong on this issue, you would have either voted against the bill or sent it back to committee for correction. That tells me that this is simply a political issue now, not what is right issue, because you stated what is right by your vote. So here we are again to give the people a chance to be heard, an opportunity that is very important, I agree. And on this issue in particular, it has been given at least 3 times since 2014. But that's okay. I just ask that you listen to the facts of the issue, not the emotions. Understand the rationale of those statements and what it really means, and not the political advantage that you might gain. Such as when someone says a penny saved here can go to other projects, when we have proven a penny invested here will result in $1 that can go to those same projects. Or when someone says the leader always sleeps or eats last, because it has a deeper meaning than what you believe. The leader slept and ate last because it was their responsibility to ensure the tent was secure enough to allow his soldiers to rest. And it was his responsibility to ensure there was enough food to feed them, including themselves. They slept and ate last because if anything was miscalculated, they would not sleep nor eat, placing the accountability on the leader. But make no mistake, the leader is expected to rest and nourish himself. How else can they lead from the front and make tactical decisions that may affect his or her soldiers on the front line? If everyone took a historical look at this issue, you will see that since 1991, the last time that the leader's salaries was updated, the soldiers have been given several bumps in salaries to keep up with the national trend of those salaries. For example, teachers, nurses, public safety, the courts, and the overall classified service. The leaders were only updated once in 2014, 23 years later, or as we said earlier, last. Here is my offering for a solution or a better course of action than this Bill 4-34. The governor has ordered another wage study, and that potentially will be complete before this body's term is done. It makes a lot of sense, and it reduces wasted resources to hold this bill and any other bill that affects the salaries till the new study is complete. When that happens, it will bring these spinning wheels to a halt, and you will have justification from a neutral, non-government human resource professional to support your next vote. Even the loud minority of voters who want this repeal, and by the way, they're the same ones that want a part-time legislature, should not be able to refute the report. Thank you for hearing me today. Sana Masi.
Thank you very much, Chief. Chief Cruz. J.I. On the list, you're next. Hi.
Yes, sir. I think he wanted the mic just passed.
Buenas and Hafaday. Good evening, Speaker Cruz and members of the Committee on Adjudication and Appropriation. I am Joseph Cruz, and I am the Chief of Police for the Guam Police Department. This evening, I submit this testimony in opposition of Bill 4-34, introduced by Senator Frank Aguon Jr., an act relative to the salary compensation of the Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, and the members of the 34th Guam Legislature. This bill involves, number one, the restoration of salaries to levels before Public Law 27-05. Number two, legislative compensation. And lastly, number three, the salary compensation for the Governor and the Lieutenant Governor. Bill 4-34 intends to reduce the salaries of the Legislature, the Governor, and the Lieutenant Governor to salaries that existed prior to the Competitive Wage Act of 2014. Senators will be compensated at approximately $55,000 per annum, while the Governor and the Lieutenant Governor will be compensated at $90,000 and $85,000 per annum, respectively. It is important to note that those salaries were last adjusted back in 1991. This means that for 23 years prior to 2014, those salaries, as did many salaries in the government of Guam, remained stagnant. When considering the intent of Bill 4-34, from the perspective of the Guam Police Department, a department of approximately 300 uniformed officers who have all received a 40% law enforcement pay increase as a result of a compensation study by the Hay Group, the repeal of the wages of the Governor and the Lieutenant Governor will mean that based on just salaries alone, 7 police officers will earn more than the Lieutenant Governor and 4 will earn more than the Governor. When salaries and benefits are considered, 104 police officers will earn more than the Lieutenant Governor and 72 will earn more than the Governor. While the 40% law enforcement pay raise was a justified pay raise for the law enforcement officers throughout the government, for the 2 senior elected officials in the government of Guam to be earning less than the police officers whom they lead seems hardly justifiable. Because the introduction of this bill followed closely by Bill 11-34 COR, an act relative to restoring the salaries of elected and appointed officials affected by Public Law 32-208, to amend the amounts established prior to the enactment of that public law, which was introduced on January 19, 2017, one questions the true intent of this bill. Is this good policy, or is it great politics? Is this a true savings for the government of Guam? When you consider that the cost savings in rolling back the salaries of the Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Legislature, the rollback of those elected officials would only save the government of Guam about $47,000 per month. That's less than 1% of the total personnel salary of $8.8 million. In essence, the proposed rollback of salaries would save the government less than 0.0007% of the annual government of Guam budget. I have to ask, does this make sense? Does it make sense that the Governor and the Lieutenant Governor make far less than police officers or firefighters who have responsibilities far less than the responsibilities of the chief executives of our government? Does it make sense that a bill writer or a chief of staff for a senator to make more than the senator that he or she works for? To me, that makes no practical sense. What does make practical sense is for the people of Guam to invest in their leaders. Invest in the little bit of savings back into their leaders who can reap a bigger return on their investment through good leadership, hard work, and out-of-the-box thinking to solve bigger problems and issues of our government and for our people. In essence, bills like 4-34 look to dumb down leadership in government, which negatively impacts the position of the Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, and the senators, and thus impacts overall government service. While one could argue that because some governors and lieutenant governors in our nation earn less than what our governor and lieutenant governor earn, that we should do the same. I must contend that Guam is a territory of the United States and is positioned geographically thousands of miles away from the closest state or territory. Because of the tyranny of distance, our elected leaders contend with those issues that are very different and unique than those who are leaders of the lower 48 states. Our leaders do not have the luxury of seeking the assistance from a neighboring state. They rely on their expertise and resounding leadership to ensure that the people of Guam are properly cared for. Again, an investment into the salaries of our elected leaders is an investment to the people of Guam. A clear example of the investment in our leadership is seen just to the north in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Whereas the governor of the CNMI earns approximately $120,000 per annum, this bill will roll our governor's salary back to $90,000. And whereas the lieutenant governor of the CNMI earns approximately $100,000, this bill will roll our lieutenant governor back to $85,000. And whereas the CNMI House and state members earn approximately $70,000, ladies and gentlemen, this bill will roll back your salaries to $55,000. With those kinds of comparisons, keeping in mind that Guam has a population of approximately 170,000 people as compared to approximately 55,500 residents in the CNMI, and with Guam having a myriad of diverse issues that our leaders must deal with, what are we really saying about our elected leaders? What we should do, as Chief St. Nicholas has said, is leave the wage studies in the hands of third-party experts and away from politicians. The process should be about the positions and the responsibilities that they entail. It should be about the position that one holds and not the person that holds it. There are many factors that played into the outcome of the recent election. I believe that good government requires good leadership, and one of the several ways to achieve good leadership is to pay salaries commensurate to the position and responsibility and the talent that is required for such leadership. I strongly believe that reducing the salaries of the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the 15 senators is not the answer to solving these issues that face our government. In actuality, that would only exacerbate the problem. We need good leadership in government, and we should compensate those elected officials accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to end with a quote by Simon Sinek, who said, quote, "Leadership is not about the next election, it's about the next generation," end quote. Members of this astute committee, thank you. Members of this astute committee, I ask that you think about our people, and I ask that you think about the future of our people. Si Zeus Maasi para itempun midzu pagu, thank you for this opportunity to provide this testimony regarding Bill 04-34. Thank you.
It's always terrible after I go to this two gentlemen, but I agree with their sentiments. My name is Christine Belletu. I am the Director of the Department of Administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee to have the opportunity to provide both written and oral comments on 4-34. The Department of Administration manages both the fiscal and human resource functions of the executive branch. While we understand the intent of the bill, it fails to either accomplish fiscal responsibility or promote fair practices in compensation based on a common sense personnel policies. Leaders of any nonprofit, private entity, and even our government should be compensated for the added responsibility and accountability that is inherent in overseeing any entity. Bill 434 seeks to diminish the esteemed office of our elected officials by having them earn less than those they supervise. Further, it goes against the compensation set by an independent third party who evaluated the merits of the position and determined the appropriate pay for those who occupy the position. Pay scales were not established by who occupied the position, but rather the duties, responsibilities, and accountability of the position itself. It would be ludicrous to suggest that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court make less than the justices, for the Attorney General of Guam to make less than the Assistant Attorney Generals, for the university president, the superintendent, to make less than their people, and for the public auditor to make less than her auditors. How can we suggest that the highest elected official of our island make less than his cabinet members or line employees? There is no other official on island that has the same level of responsibility or accountability. The Competitive Wage Act of 2014 was enacted 3 years ago to update the government of Guam's compensation for classified, unclassified, and elected officials. The study with which these salaries